What's going on, everyone? This is Kurt coming back to you for the Lionshare Poker Academy. And today I'm going to do a video that I've wanted to actually put out here for a little while now. And this is essentially going to show you guys how I run a study session when I'm doing one myself here anyway. I usually incorporate three things. One thing is some spots from ICMizer, as we can see here. And I usually just jot them down in this little notepad here. So anything that I think is even vaguely close, I'll just put down here. Some of them might not even be, super difficult spots. I just want to make sure that a spot that might look a little ABC and that I think is close, I just want to check it out just to see how accurate I am with my assumptions here. And the same can go for a lot of pre-flop spots here too. I know a lot of these spots are going to mix, and then some of them are just going to be very close between, like, let's say call or fold, or they mix 3-bet and call. So I definitely like to mark down the ones that I think can either mix or I think are really close, and I just mark every single spot down I have here, and then I just end up checking them in my charts here. I do use BBZ's charts. We are not affiliated with them and by any means. I'm just showing you guys the charts that I've been using, and I suggest that you guys use these as well. And then later on, I have some hands that I've marked here in a tournament that I played recently. And again, a lot of these spots might not be close. I might just want to see like a little detail here and there broken down in Odin. And thankfully, now that we have Odin, we can break a lot of these spots down very quickly. So rather than, as I was doing previously when I only had access to PO Solver, where I would just take the most difficult spots that I had and would choose those hands to go over in a study session. Now I can I had to utilize my time a lot better there because I could only check out 5 or 6 hands in a 1 hour amount of time basically. And now with Odin, we can just type it in, we wait 20 seconds, and then we get the results immediately. So now, rather than picking out the most complicated spots, I'm just checking out any spot that I think might have a little bit, or that I might find a little bit interesting, or just to see if I like nailed a spot or nailed a few assumptions, or just a spot that might seem close, and see what we can do. So we'll take a look at these as well, but we're going to start out mainly since we haven't really done a lot with ICMizer. I just want to run some some basic spots here for you guys and just show you how I end up utilizing this program here. It's also very affordable, and if you are a tournament player, you should absolutely be using this program. I don't think that that these spots are necessarily very fun to study, and I do find them a bit tedious myself, but if you're going to play tournament poker, you really have to be at least somewhat competent when it comes to push-fold spots as well as calling off spots, and then you also need to have accurate charts to be able to implement yourself, because the preflop ranges that ICMizer gives you are generally not very accurate in relation to the actual charts that we use or the preflop strategies that we want to use. So you're going to see me altering a lot of the preflop charts here quite a bit. So that being said, we'll just get right into it. So we'll check out the first spot here. It looks like Villain, or this was played from our Villain. I must have just saw an interesting spot from them. So anyway, it says Villain raise calls are 30 big blinds with a7 from the cutoff versus 15 big blind button jam. So we're going to go here. I played these spots at the, let's see, is that... Oh, I could actually play it at 100. I didn't notice because I think the last time I checked these at 100, they didn't have the ante feature. So I think the smallest blind denomination I was using was 100, 200 with an ante. But we'll just keep it at this for now because this is what I'm used to using. So 30 big blinds would be 6K at 200 big blind. And we said that the button shoved 15 big blinds, which would be 3K here. So let's see, what would we... A7 suited here. So we'll just implement this. This isn't really super relevant. If we put this hand in, this will come up anyway once it gets to us. So anyway, we're going to open this up, and we're going to face a 15 big blind jam. We're just going to run this. But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to adjust the ranges from the preflop open here, because, so I'll just show you what these preflop open ranges look like. So there's no way that we're opening hands like, Jack 7 off, King 5 offsuit. So we need to take a lot of these hands out of our range here. So for 30 big blinds, we're going to be running a range like this. So I'm going to take this off to the side, and I'm going to implement this into ICMizer here. So what we do here is we click on this button here to get our preflop range, and then we want to go down here to edit. And I'm just going to copy in all the hands here that we want to be using. Again, this might look a little tedious. We might take a little bit of time. We don't have to go through all these hands. I just want to give you guys a few examples of how I utilize this program here. So 9-6 getting in there a little bit. And you don't have to be 100% accurate with these, just as long as it's something close to what the solver is giving you here or what your charts are telling you. And yeah, let's see, ace-5 can get in there, and then the rest of these need to get out. Up to king-9, and then queen-9 gets in there quite a bit. Jack-9 about half the time, and 10-9's actually in there quite a bit too for 30 bigs. What am I missing? Pocket 2s is not in our opening range here, although, I mean, I might put this in at a small weight. I mean, generally, I probably am opening this spot here anyway. Essentially, I mean, the weaker the field you're playing against, the wider you can open. I'm usually pretty wide with my opens in general. I mean, that could be a leak for sure. But, and then the next thing we're going to see is the strategy from, and this is essentially what button can be shoving profitably. But that being said, I don't necessarily think that all these hands are going to shove here. Like, for example, I don't think, obviously, like pocket aces is a profitable jam here, but I don't think this is the best play to be made. I think calling is probably a little bit better here than jamming. And then I guess what I'll do is I'll check out the chart and just show you guys at 15 big blinds what the chart wants to be doing here, or what our charts are telling us. So for 15 bigs versus a cutoff open, you can see we are pretty high frequency slow play with pocket aces here. And then to mix our trapping range, we throw in some ace-6 suited, ace-7 suited, king-10 suited, things like this. I'm kind of surprised king-10 suited is a flat here. I'd probably play that pretty pure jam. King-jack off, queen-jack off, these hands can call as well here. And then let's say, for example, like the pocket 4s through pocket 7s. Like, I don't think these hands play very well post-flop. So in general, I think I would just pure jam these hands here rather than decide to call them. So we're not going to always play the charts 100% as they're given here. We also need to consider, you know, the type of opponent we're going against, the stage of the tournament. So there's always like little adjustments. This is just a really good basic guideline to be taken on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move this to the side, bring back ICMizer, and I'm going to edit the ranges here that the button is shoving. As I said, I think aces is, or at least should be played at a pretty high frequency call here. King jack off, also doing very little jamming here. We are also only jamming ace-9 off profitably. I mean, there's a little bit of call between these, but it's close enough where we can just pure jam here. This is mostly jamming ace-7 suited. They're choosing as a pretty high frequency slow play. Ace-6 suited is full weight slow playing, and all these hands are pure jamming here. I'm going to put this at 50% because, like I said, I think I would basically pure jam this hand in this spot. So I think we can just kind of do whatever here. Looks like queen-9 suited is getting a little bit of jam here as well. And then, again, like all these pairs here that can jam, it says pocket 3s can only really jam here a little less than 50%. So we're going to do this. Pocket 2, surprisingly, I just assumed that we could rip any pair here and be winning, but apparently that's not the case here. So yeah, this is accurate enough, I think, to how people are actually playing. For what it's worth, I think people probably do shove aces here. So maybe I'll just put like, you know, 10% they could have pocket aces here. So what we want to do is we want to calculate this. And now that we have our edited ranges here, we want to run this spot again. Take a sip of water while we're waiting. And now we're going to have a little bit more of an accurate output as to what we should be calling with. And it looks here that, yeah, the ace-7 suited is a profitable call. And now another thing that I want to point out here is that in a 15 big blind pot, we're going to see a lot of really thin calls here. So I mean, I guess that part's irrelevant. The part I want to say here is that, for example, Ace Four suited is winning 1/100th of a big blind here. Let's say Pocket Twos is winning 2/10ths of a big blind here. So essentially, what I want to tell you guys here is that these really thin spots, even though ICMizer tells you it's a profitable call, I think you can really just pass out or pass up these spots here, especially the bigger your edges here in any tournament, the less you want to be taking thin spots. And I would certainly consider a hand like Jack 10 suited, although it's winning 6/100ths of a big blind. I would not necessarily be looking to take this hand and call it off, even though it's being told that this is a profitable call. The stronger our edges, the less we want to be taking thin spots, because essentially our opponents are going to give us better opportunities to be making some more valuable decisions here than these like really thin spots here. So yeah, essentially in this spot, I would probably still think Ace 7 suited is a pretty good call. Even Pocket Threes here is pretty close. I think that's still, I might find a fold here in game. I'm honestly surprised to see Pocket Threes winning a half a big blind here, but I think that's probably strong enough for us to be calling here, as well as like the Ace 9 off here. So basically we'd be Ace 9 off, Ace 7 suited, Pocket Threes plus, and even Queen Jack suited, King 10 suited are winning a fair amount here as well. So yeah, so we can take this and just get, like I said, this solid baseline. It looks like our opponent did make a pretty good call here, even versus what I consider a pretty aggressive range. Now, another thing that I want to bring up to you guys is that this, again, is just, you know, essentially what our charts are recommending. In general, our opponents are not going to be jamming as aggressively as the charts are really showing. So let's say, for example, we want to tighten up ranges here a little bit. So we could actually adjust ranges to, let's say, take out some Pocket Threes. Maybe they just decide to call like Ace Deuce and Ace 3 sometimes. Maybe they don't full weight jam the King 10 suited, King 9 suited. We'll take the King Jack out, even some Ace 9, and then just make it a little bit tighter here. And we were calling 16% before, and now this number is going to go down a little bit here, obviously because it has to call versus a tighter range here. If this is going to come up, I might have just broke ICMizer here. But so essentially, the thing that I want to bring up to you guys is that your opponents are not going to be jamming as aggressively as your charts are telling you to, or that a solver would definitely end up jamming here. Now you can see we're only calling 13% of our range down here. And a lot of those hands, like let's say we were before, like King 10 suited and Queen Jack suited, were pretty profitable calls. They've gone down quite a bit. I mean, Queen Jack suited is still kind of close. King 10 suited is winning very little. You can see now Pocket Threes isn't winning. A7 suited is a lot closer to break even now as well. So in general, again, it's good to put in ranges that your chart is showing you, but you also need to assume that most recreational to like mediocre players are not jamming as aggressively as they should be. So to counter that, we essentially want to be calling off a little tighter than what our charts are showing us. And then on the flip side, the bigger our edges in a certain field, the less we want to be taking these really thin call-off spots here, right? So these are like two things that took me, I mean, they seem like really common sense when you talk about them, and I honestly, you know, I don't know how much money I lost not following this very simple strategy here, but essentially the bigger your edges, the less thin spots you want to take. Now, if we were in a tournament where we're playing against, you know, this table is filled with top 50 to top 100 players in the world. Now these thin edges become a little bit more valuable because opponents this good aren't going to be giving you the type of opportunities to get your money in good that, say, mediocre to weaker players are going to be presenting to you. So this is essentially how you can address play in ICMizer here. Now we can get rid of that one. I'll do just more of like a pretty face-up one. Let's say, so like the easiest one that really takes no time, you don't need to implement any ranges. We can see here we jammed in EP with 9.5 bigs with King Jack off. So we'll just go up here. I just want to make sure that hopefully, okay, chip EV, okay. Just want to make sure I didn't check that out earlier. So 9.5 bigs, that's 1900, and we have King Jack offsuit. So we're just going to put that in here. get rid of these ranges here. And when you just have a push fold spot, here at 10 big blinds, you're basically just going to be push fold. So there's no reason to implement ranges when you're doing these spots. So these spots that are just classic push fold can calculate pretty quickly. So it's okay just to check a few of these spots if you want to mark them down, if you think they're close, just to keep your brain sharp. Like I said, it might not even be, the most difficult spot, but as long as you're just getting used to, doing these spots quite a bit and often, they're going to stick in your brain a lot more than if you're just, only running this program once a week or once a month even. So. And we see that we're only winning a tenth of a big blind here. So if I had seen this in game, I definitely would have chosen to fold this spot. I don't think this hand is winning enough here to consider jamming from EP here. I thought this might be making a little bit more money in this spot, but clearly it's not. Now, in reality, I think something like ace 10 plus, even pocket twos is only winning, 16th of a 1600ths of a big blind here. So I think something closer to pocket threes or pocket fours plus. King 10 suited, Queen 10 suited, Jack 10 suited, all these are pretty valuable. Probably like even Jack 9, 10 9 suited is winning a little bit more than King Jack, but I think all these spots are pretty thin here. So so again, essentially, this is telling us that this is a profitable shove, but that's not necessarily the end all be all. We can't just look at this and be like, oh, this was a profitable shove, it's fine. Yes, that is, true, but the point is, if I had seen that this is only winning, 1200ths of a big blind here, I definitely would have just passed on the spot and waited for a better opportunity to get my money in. So this little simple spot here that took me just a couple seconds to run just shows me that, maybe at 9.5 bigs, King Jack is a little too thin. Even though it's winning, it's not necessarily a spot that I'm willing to take here. So, maybe we'll look at one more example if we can find something a little bit different. No, I mean, I guess that's fine when it comes to ICMizer. I didn't want to spend too much time on this. I just kind of wanted to show you guys how I break down hands and basically how I decipher, whether or not I want to call or fold, mainly based on how much I'm winning or losing in a spot like this. So I think we basically covered all I wanted to discuss there. So we'll do a couple pre-flop spots as well. So essentially, I just go from 15 big blinds and up. So I'll just look for the first 15 big blind spot, just see what I'm doing here. And also, I think you could probably incorporate these in ICMizer as well. But I kind of like at 15 big blinds, I do have raise folds here. So I don't necessarily just run it in ICMizer because, if I take 15 big blinds from the cutoff with King 10 suited here, oh, sorry, I read this wrong. I thought it was jam King 10 suited from the cutoff. I was like, yeah, this is obviously a jam here. But essentially what I was going to say is that, like, let's say it folded to us in the cutoff here and I have a decision. At 15 big blinds, I would definitely have some raise folds at this stack size. So I wouldn't necessarily just put it into ICMizer because ICMizer is only going to tell you what hands are profitable to shove, but not whether or not it's optimal to be like opening or jamming a certain hand. And I think the charts give us a more accurate representation of what what those ranges actually should be. So at 15 big blinds, I think the spot was we jammed the cutoff with King 10 suited versus EP. So I just go in here under the gun versus cutoff. And we do see that King 10 is mostly jamming here. So pretty happy to see that we were pretty on there. And you can see even with this sliver of call here, I would mainly just use this to pure jam. Now, I guess it does make sense. Let's say if EP is, and this is probably something else that I should have written down here. Now, for example, I could have written, I jammed the cutoff with 15 big blinds with King 10 suited versus EP, but there would be a big difference if EP was opening with like 30 big blinds plus, as opposed to if EP was opening a 15 to 20 big blind stack, mainly because at 30 bigs plus, EP is going to be opening a wider range of hands, which would make King 10 suited a more profitable jam, as opposed to, let's say, EP's opening off of 15 or 20 big blinds. Their range is going to be much tighter. So for that regard, I would actually see a lot more incentive to be putting in some call here with a King 10 suited. So I actually immediately take that back. So, and this is essentially how I would read it in this spot too. Same can go for like the ace 10 suited here. You do see that ace 10 suited mainly wants to call and has a little bit of jam here. Now, I think, in general, it mainly wants to call here, but let's say that EP is, a very big stack, and they're opening, between 35 and 40% of hands from early position, which is obviously insanely wide. That means they're going to have a lot of trash here, and then we definitely make a lot more money by just jamming it with ace-10 suited, because this hand is going to be much stronger versus a wider early position opening range than a standard one. So these are just little things, like when you're checking out the chart, these little assumptions that you kind of want to be making in this regard here, or at least what I've been doing, and I think has been working pretty well for me. So we'll just check another one here real quick. 20 big blinds, looks like we folded the cutoff with ace-10 off versus MP. In my head, that sounds pretty tight. So I would say if I was going to play this hand, I would mainly decide to call. Maybe some jam gets in there, but yeah, at first glance, this seems really tight. I think we probably should mainly be calling here with a sliver of jam. And I wouldn't be surprised if some fold does get in here. I think from low jack under, we 100% need to VPip ace-10 off. And from under the gun, we probably get more fold. So we'll just go to MP and see what it has to say. Yeah, so actually, I was pretty accurate with this fold here. So we do see it's actually 3-betting none all in here at 20 big blinds, which I don't really incorporate too much off of 20 big blinds, and that's something that I've seen these charts incorporating themselves. I also don't see for 20 big blinds a lot of people mixing a lot of 3-bets none all in at 20 big blinds. And then on the flip side, when I do see people implementing the 3-bet none all in at 20 big blinds here, they're more so weighted towards the strongest hands, like way more pocket kings, pocket aces, than they are, let's say, a hand like, ace-7 suited, ace-8 suited, so ace-10 offsuit. So mainly when I do see these small 3-bets being used at 20 big blinds by, random opponents, more often than not, they are more weighted towards stronger hands than they are 3-bet bluffs here. So I probably just choose not to use that size at all, although I don't hate it being incorporated. That doesn't mean we can't use it. That's just something I haven't really implemented into my own game and could possibly look into it myself here in the future. Now, this next spot here, we'll check out, looks like we called the small blind with king jack off versus a button open. And I did note here that the button was a tight opener, so that's going to influence my decision of whether or not I want to be mixing calls and jams, or maybe I just want to pure call a hand like this if the opener is a little bit tighter than they actually should be here. So we'll go down to 25 bigs. I would assume in general we probably get some jam here. If I had to guess, I would definitely think we want to mix here more often than not. I mean, as long as we don't fold. This hand's way too strong to fold, obviously, versus a button open, versus a button that's opening 43% of their range. So, yeah. So essentially, and this is a point I brought up to some members we saw earlier as well. I think there was a spot in one of our previous sessions where, and I think it was cutoff versus small blind. And essentially, one of the biggest things that I've recognized by using these charts is that from these later position opens here, let's say we're facing in the small blind, we're facing an open from the cutoff or the button. Since these ranges are going to contain like a wide range of hands here, we essentially counter that by playing more of a high frequency jam strategy as opposed to mixing a lot of jams and calls. So you can see here that since we are facing a very wide open, we kind of counter that by jamming here very high frequency. We see we're jamming 22.5% of our range and only calling 2% of it. So clearly we are not doing much calling here at all. And I think that's basically because the button is full with just a lot of crap that they're going to have to fold, and we can put a lot of pressure on them by just jamming in our hand and forcing them to call. Also, it's pretty good that if we just take the pot down without showdown and avoid playing our pot out of position, I think that's a pretty big win for us. Even if we're playing against a weaker opponent, the fact that we are playing out of position is never going to be great. It's always going to be more difficult to play out of position here. So, yeah, obviously we do pure jam here. I was kind of curious if we got some call at 25 bigs. At 20 bigs, I would assume that this would be closer to a pure jam here. At 25, I thought we might get some call. But even here, versus a tighter open, I still think we could probably end up pure jamming here. I don't hate the call by any means, but it's still good to look at these spots just to see what your overall strategy wants to be in a spot like this. So, yeah, interesting to see. I think I definitely just wanted to see if we ended up mixing in general, the fact that we are pure jam in that spot. Maybe we can even end up taking a pure jam strategy versus a tight button opener. And yeah, I mean, we have another very similar spot. Actually, we'll take a look at. Looks like we called the small blind with king 10 off from a button open. Now at 30 bigs, we are definitely going to have a non-all-in 3-bet strategy here. So I would not be surprised to see us potentially 3-bet bluff a hand like this. I mean, I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see all options being used. I think calling, 3-bet folding, and or 3-betting not all in, and well, obviously we'd be folding if we got 4-bet jammed on with king 10 off. But I would see that all three options are pretty good here. So we're just gonna see what they end up doing here. And you can see king 10 off is mostly calling here and mixing in a little bit of jam with just a sliver of non-all-in. So I didn't expect this to be so high frequency call. I also would have expected the 3-bet jam and 3-bet non-all-in options to be a little more similar to this here. So, and then you can see king jack off is still like playing a very high frequency jam. Even at 30 big blinds here, we're still jamming a lot of our hands here. You can see we're jamming close to 16% of our range here. And then for the non-all-in sides, we're only using about 3.5% of our range, which is still like very small here. I guess we want to be pretty polarized in a spot like this. Again, the majority of our range, if we're going to be 3-betting here, I guess wants to be 3-betting all in versus a wide opening range here. And then we're also going to mix in some calls with some stronger hands here, like pocket aces, like trap here. And then of course you can see, like, I think like ace king suited is a pretty good non-all-in 3-bet here as well. I would probably have chosen to 3-bet ace queen suited, not all in, as well as some ace jack suited too. These hands, like these suited hands, play a lot better post flop when they do get called and we're out of position. So suited hands are always going to be played better post flop than the offsuit variety. So this is why I would expect essentially full frequency 3-bet jam from the offsuit varieties here, and this is essentially the strategy I would be playing here. Ace king to ace 8, I would essentially pure 3-bet jam these hands, and then probably more towards the ace king suited to ace 10 suited, I would 3-bet none all in and probably have to stack off versus a 4-bet jam here. And then you can see some of our bluffs are a lot of the low suited ace x combos, all pairs here basically want to be jamming here. Again, surprised to see jacks and 10s want to be 3-betting for the all-in size here. I think these hands are definitely strong enough to 3-bet call and play well enough post-flop where we're not like super upset if we end up getting called here. Also, I don't think people call off, especially at 30 big blinds. They don't call as wide as our charts might be telling us. So it might actually be a lot more valuable for us to be 3-betting not all in with hands like pocket jacks and pocket 10s if our opponents aren't calling our jams as wide as they should. So that means we probably end up just getting more folds when we do jam hands as strong as jacks and 10s. So to counter the charts that we're seeing here, I might make an adjustment and just play a pure 3-bet not all in strategy with, let's say, pocket kings down to even pocket 9s possibly, but 9s I would have thought would have mixed. I'm fine with either option there, but like 10s through kings I would essentially pure 3-bet not all in here. So kind of an interesting spot here, and just, you know, it's good to show you guys the little adjustments that I'm making. Like, I'm not just blindly checking out the charts. I want to also take into account what I think the population is doing from a lot of perspectives and kind of implement that into our charts as well, because I mean, almost nobody is playing exactly as the charts say. Even the people who are looking at charts in game are not playing 100% like this, and obviously there's plenty of recreationals out there as well who don't even have access to charts. So then we just essentially take our general, you know, assumptions that we make from the experience we have playing every single day. So yeah, so I guess that's good enough there. I wanted to show you guys just a few hands and just the process that I take here. I write down all these notes while I'm playing. Just to, I mean, I guess I could tag them in my HUD, but usually I save the tag hands in my HUD for post-flop spots. I used to have a post-flop section here that I would keep for, or before I was using a HUD anyway. I got Poker Tracker a couple months ago. Wasn't really using a HUD much, but you know, it was kind of getting tedious marking down all my post-flop spots because those are pretty annoying to have to keep writing down while you have, you know, 8 to 10 tables running, and then you know, you're just trying to remember the hand and type it out, and and make sure you get everything set up accurately. As you guys see, my poker tracker did crash on me again. That's been a very trend that's been happening to me as of late. Luckily, we have the legend Pete and I bringing me my new computer here in the next couple of days. So I'm just going to pull up the tournament that I was going to show you guys, and I'll bring it over for you guys to check out here. So yeah, just ahead of time, if my Hold'em manager does end up crashing here, apologies ahead of time. This has been happening quite a bit, so I think this new computer is coming to me just in time. Thanks again, Pete and I. So let's do this. And again, we're not going to have time to run over all these hands, of course. So I'm going to do this in a way that you guys can see here. I'll have Odin up here. And yeah, we're just going to check out some hands that we ended up playing here. I'm going to mark that down. It didn't crash. Don't worry, guys. Just going to take a quick sip of water. Or a gulp, if you guys can hear that. So, yeah, I'm just going to check up a few hands. Again, a lot of these hands might not look like they're super complicated, but there might have just been like a small spot I wanted to check out. Again, that's kind of what's been great about Odin. I can check all these, little tiny spots and run them really quickly, so I don't just have to choose from the just only the closest spots that I had all day. I can really run through a ton of these hands in a much quicker manner than I was doing before. Now here, I'm going to use a mixed strategy between open and call. Looks like I rolled high, so I ended up opening here. I think 3.5x needs to be the minimum size here. Anything between 3.5x and 4x at 50 big blinds deep, I think will be good here. And we get the Queen 9-6 flop. I would assume without a heart here, I'm going to be pretty high frequency check here. Although I wouldn't hate a bet. I think this hand probably isn't the greatest combo for it. Then we get the 10 on the turn here. This makes things quite a bit interesting. Obviously, we pick up some equity with the open-ended straight draw here, but there's also going to be a fair amount of hands that our opponent hits here as well. So I'm probably going to roll between bets and checks here as well. It looks like we ended up checking. And then the 9 on the river, I think our hand is just strong enough to end up showing down here. And then we face this bet, and I guess this is what I wanted to check out. I definitely wanted to check out our turn strategy here as well as the turn size. I think this board is pretty wet. I think we probably get to use both like small and bigger sizes here on the turn. I also don't think we just necessarily want to be piling in money because this board is pretty dynamic here. There's lots of straight combinations. There's a lot of flush draws our opponent could still have. So we don't want to just be piling in money blindly here. That being said, we're also going to have really strong draws and really strong hands that are also going to benefit from using a big size here. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a bigger size being used here on the turn too. Now, once it gets to the river, these are spots that I've actually been working over a little bit as of late, and just kind of curious of what the weakest hand that we ended up calling here is. I'm not sure how relevant our blockers are here. I don't think our opponent ever has Jack 8 or King Jack. I think these hands bet all the time on the turn, so I think our Jack blocker here is pretty irrelevant. I think, well, he's calling all offsuit Jack 9 combos, so again, I don't think our Jack makes a whole lot of sense here. So anyway, we ended up folding. So at 50 big blinds deep. Another thing I was going to say that's pretty sweet is that blind versus blind, there are single raise pot. Okay, so sorry guys, I'm gonna put this in first and then go to what I was thinking. Queen of hearts, 6 of clubs, 9 of hearts, Queen of hearts, 6 of clubs, 9 of hearts. Did I do that right? Yep. Okay, so yeah, another great thing about Odin here, and again, we're not affiliated with Odin. I just think this is a really great product. Hopefully we can have some sort of partnership with them in the future because obviously, it's nice to save money on a great product. So what I was going to say is that these spots when running in PO Solver usually take a very long time to run because ranges are so wide and stacks are fairly deep. So when you have really wide ranges here, your sim is going to take a long time to calculate. And now that we can do these blind versus blind spots and get the results here in 20 seconds, I mean, this is really great. And blind versus blind spots should really be studied pretty heavily because these are very common spots that we face, not only in poker in general, but specifically in tournament poker with non-rake ante games. You're going to be playing a lot of limp pots, a lot of limp ISO, limp 3-bet, limp call. spots here. So since ranges are so wide, it is very important to be studying these spots, and Odin really gives us an opportunity to really hammer these home. So we'll just throw this on here. It looks like Ace Jack, at least the way Odin has it, mainly wants to be playing as a limp raise. That's why you see it only in here a little bit. So I guess whatever. I mean, honestly, I'm just going to go here and check out the blind versus blind strategies. These are also something I need to study a little bit more myself. I admittedly am not super accurate with blind versus blind, but I think it's also very important to really have these spots down packed. And you can see here, Ace Jack is actually a pure call. So these ranges are pretty accurate with Odin's ranges here. It looks like Ace King through Ace Jack mainly want to be playing as a limp 3-bet in these spots, and then they're more so looking to just open with the suited varieties, because these hands play a lot better post flop. So when we do get called, we have hands that play a lot better here, and these hands are a little bit more incentivized by getting folds when we get to limp 3-bet and our opponent folds. So definitely learning something there, so that's nice to point out. So we did check, and our opponent did as well. So we'll just get to the turn here pretty quickly. And the turn was the 10 of spades. And again, I think on this turn we get to do a variety of things, and I think we get to use a variety of sizes as well. I think small sizes and big sizes are both going to be utilized here. We can see here that the 33% size is going to be the most utilized size here. We get a little bit, 16.5%, we are betting 33%, about 7.5% we're using the 2/3 size, close to that for the 80% size, we're using it about 5% of the time. And it looks like we're really not betting more than pot here very often, and that's only being used 3.5% of the time. 1.25x pot's only being used 2% of the time too. So mainly we want to be using the smaller size, which I think makes a whole lot of sense, because as I said before, this is a pretty dynamic board. And yes, we are going to have hands that want to bet for value and protection, but this board is so wet and our opponent can have so many strong hands here as well as strong draws. We don't necessarily just want to start blasting in money here. So we can see that the Ace Jack combos, our specific combo was, let me go back to this real quick, was Ace of Spades, Jack of Clubs. And we can see here that this hand is close to pure checking. Again, I think I did say something that I would probably want to lean more towards having the hearts in our hand to end up betting here. So that way, when we do miss, we can end up turning these hands into bluffs. Also, when the hearts fall on the river, it's less likely that our opponents are going to have flushes, obviously. So yeah, we did end up checking here. I would have probably expected to see some bet from our specific hand, even without the hearts, although I would not have guessed that it would be essentially pure checking here. And then we face another check here. What's the river? Well, I'm waiting for this. 9 of spades. So check, check. And then again, on the 9 of spades, I think our hand is strong enough where we can just show down. I don't see any need to bet as a bluff, and I don't think our strongest hand is strong enough to value bet. So yes, we are pure checking with Ace Jack when we do get to the river. And what I'm really interested to see here is what our minimum defense frequency is versus a value bet. So he bets 5K. How many big blinds is that? We're at 1K big blinds, so 5Ks, 5 bigs. So this is about 66% pot. And interestingly enough, this is pure calling here, and also mixing in some bluff raise, which is pretty interesting as well. And I think that's mainly because, as I said before, as our Jack blocker isn't very relevant to his strongest hands, because I would assume that our opponent is going to pure bet with Jack 8 and King Jack here on the turn. So our opponent doesn't have these hands here. Now, on the flip side, if our opponent never has a straight here, that means we are still capable of having a straight ourselves. So essentially, our opponent never has anything stronger than trips in this spot. I think our opponent should be pure betting with 8-9, Jack 8, King Jack. So the fact that we have a pretty strong blocker to the strongest hands here, I think this is why we even see a hand as strong as Ace Jack, bluffing here. But it's also pure calling. So that being said, I don't necessarily hate my fold because I think a lot of people are playing these spots a lot tighter and probably not finding the same amount of bluffs that Odin is here. But the fact that it is pure calling makes me think that I probably made a mistake here in the spot for sure. And again, just seeing what our like lightest call downs are here that aren't pairs. You can see ace king, although it's, you know, hand strength is obviously better than ace jack. I think that jack becomes a pretty relevant blocker because it blocks more straights here. So I think that's why we see more calls here with ace jack, and we see a little bit more folds here with ace king. I don't. I'm kind of. This is kind of crazy actually to see that we are like mixing folds with a hand like 6-5 here, but ace jack is pure calling. So I would have just assumed that we probably don't get any fold with a pair in this spot. So this is kind of interesting as well. And this is even mixing folds here versus an opponent that's bluffing as aggressively as Odin is. So yeah, this is pretty interesting to see here. So queen 6, obviously pure calling, that's the queen. 8-6 pure calling, blocking straights here is pretty good. I think this is why we want to see 8-6 calling pure and then a hand like 6-5 folding. But then you see 7-6 mixing some fold here too. So yeah, it's kind of doing whatever here a lot. So it looks like the lightest call that we're going to be making is like, well, some ace-3, ace-deuce, I guess if we get here, mixes some call here, but it's not pure. I guess the strongest pure call that we see here is this ace-6 offsuit that we really don't play this way very much, as well as ace-8 here. I guess having the straight blockers are pretty relevant in this spot. Now, I will say that I wouldn't have ever expected to be turning the ace-jack into a bluff. So this is a valuable piece of information that I'm seeing right here that I definitely wouldn't have thought. I thought we would have been just call or fold in the spot. So it's nice to see that a hand that I considered as strong as ace-jack is actually mixing in some bluff here. And I think this is mainly because our blocker is to the straights is so good here, and since our opponent checked on the turn, they essentially have 0 straights in their range, and the strongest hands they have here are going to be trips in this spot. So yeah, we'll go back here again just to make sure that our opponent never has 8-9 here. Actually, our opponent, not 8-9, 7-8. So yeah, you see 8-7 is really not in here at all. Jack-8 is in there a sliver, so I guess they are doing a little bit of checking on the turn with Jack-8. I would assume it's mostly, yeah. So the Jack-8 of hearts never ends up checking. So these other ones not containing hearts end up checking, although I would have just assumed that none of these end up checking ever. You can see King-Jack, both these combos here are just not in their range. So essentially on the turn, our opponent is betting pure with most of its straights instead of a little bit of Jack-8 here. And I would absolutely say that in game, I think if our opponent had Jack-8 and most opponents that we face, I would assume that they're just going to be betting the turn here. So I think this is kind of irrelevant information, although it's good for us to see that we could incorporate some checking here with Jack-8. So although I don't think our opponents are doing this, it's kind of valuable information to me to see that checking with a Jack-8 on the turn is a thing here anyway. I guess this is the spot I wanted to go to here. Just to see what we're doing here. So yeah, you see it, Jack-8 from the big blind is checking a little bit here, but then the King-Jacks just pure betting here. The 8-7s pure betting here. So yeah, essentially, I guess this is just a way to keep a sliver of super strong hands in their range. Although I think that most opponents in game are not actually doing this. So yeah, interesting spot there. Learned a little bit more in that spot than I was anticipating. So I think with my charts, I don't even have this spot. So this might be something, either I'm missing it or I just need to purchase more charts here. I do have, so essentially the chart I have will tell me what we want to do in this spot, like what our squeeze range is going to be, but I don't think our ranges tell us like what we want to be doing in this position as the opener facing a squeeze. So I think this is actually pretty relevant information that we need to have. Now, I would say in general, we probably want to mix here, and that's definitely going to depend a little bit about how aggressively our opponent is 3-betting and squeezing here. This opponent has some pretty reggy numbers here, so I would assume that they are capable of having a reasonable amount of bluffs here rather than just being straight value. We can just see the squeeze frequency. Where am I looking here? Fold the squeeze, call squeeze. Why am I not seeing it here? Oh, okay, squeeze. So yeah, they're actually squeezing only 4% of the time, so that's a pretty low number. Three betting in general, they are three betting about 8%, which is a little on the tight side, but it's still fine. I guess in general, I would probably end up mixing here. And for what it's worth, I think this tournament was a bounty tournament. If no, was this a bounty? I don't think it was. Either way, we'll just assume like it wasn't. So I do think we get some. We get a little bit of jam as well as a little bit of call here. I wouldn't think that this hand is weak enough to be finding folds like ace jack off. I think I would pure fold. And then I think with this hand, we can do a little bit of both. I think jamming is good because we can definitely have the best hand here. This opponent can be 3-bet calling hands like pocket jacks, pocket tens that we end up flipping against. We block ace king. That's going to snap us off. Pocket queens, pocket aces, hands like that are going to have us dominated when we are called. So I definitely see reasons for jamming here. That being said, I think calling here is probably fine too. Probably more high frequency call with a hand like ace queen suited. Again, because a hand like that plays a little bit better post flop than a hand like ace queen off. So I think this hand has more benefits by playing a little bit more aggressively and working in some jam as well as some call. Now, I don't think we're actually going to be able to run this hand because I just don't have or what I could do is just run, a 3-bet pot here. And yeah, we ended up going for the check jam. Looks like here, I think we can have some non-all-in raise sizes here when he bets so small. I just don't think this is the best candidate for it. There's a lot of turns that are really going to change the strength of our hand here, like any 8, any jack, any king, any diamond, any 10, any 9 is going to change the strength of our hand here for sure. So I think this hand is definitely good enough to get in here on the flop and requires a fair amount of protection. So I think check jamming here is good. I think we could check raise not all in with, let's say we want to, well, obviously with a straight, I think I would check raise not all in here because this hand needs very little protection. Maybe we get some check jam with like king jack no diamond here because we're unblocking the pairs and flush draws that our opponent's going to snap us off with. And then let's say we could even kind of merge bluff a hand. Like, let's say, I don't think we ever call a hand like jack 9 suited here. I think that's probably a little too loose to be calling versus a squeeze. But a hand like jack 10 suited, I think could possibly, like for example, jack 10 of clubs here, I think would be kind of a decent merge bluff. And then, so it would be great if our opponent could bet fold. And then the times that we face a jam by our opponent, we're still going to have enough equity to end up calling it off. It kind of sucks, obviously, but we do have a pair. We have a straight draw. So I think we probably have enough equity to call it off when we do check raise not all in here. And then there's even going to be times where we get it in against like ace, king, and diamonds that we're ahead with. And then, yeah, so essentially, if we want to have like a mergey kind of not all in bluff candidate, I think a hand like jack 10 of clubs would be pretty good here. So, yeah, anyway. We'll just run through this, and he has pocket tens, and we run like God because we made a decent run here. So, yeah, I think like pretty decent here. Good bet size by him. I don't think he ever has any check here with his hand. This is probably a pretty good board for us, or for him, I should say. But it's also decent for us. We're gonna have all king jack suited combos. We should have a fair amount of pocket tens, pocket nines here. I don't think we have pocket queens. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a small amount of pocket queens, but the thing that sucks about calling a hand like pocket queens, we also have another player to act. So if we call, they could call as well, and having a hand like pocket queens when we're in the worst position here is kind of bad. So since it's good enough to just get in, I think pocket queens just ends up putting it in there. So yeah, interesting hand here. We'll just go on to the next one, see if we can run it in Odin. Pretty standard open here. I think we're going to be pretty high frequency bet on this board. We are a little bit deeper here. So I haven't studied Odin basically for 100 big blinds very much. So I'm not sure how aggressively we get to c-bet here. But just in general, I do c-bet very aggressively, essentially on boards that I think are at least high frequency c-bet. So say like if Odin tells us that this is a 75% bet, 25% check spot, I would mainly just pure bet here and force our opponents to come up with the appropriate amount of check calls and check raises. I think that even the better players in the world are not check calling and check raising as aggressively as the solvers are telling us. So if we're playing against like, a mediocre regular to a weaker player, we just want to be more high frequency C bet and put a lot of pressure on our opponents. I'm going to assume this player is like pretty decent. I have a fair amount of hands on him. He has decent numbers here. So I'm going to assume that he's, playing well enough where maybe that might not work. I remember I ended up calling here. I think it's probably fine having the backdoor straight, backdoor flush draw to go with this. He's going to be check raising, obviously like some flush draws. He can merge check raise a hand like 3-4, 3-5 here, 3-2 suited, like 3-2 of clubs, I think. And then he can like also just have some give ups here on the turn where we could just steal the pot. Oh, you guys are about to see some spew here. So I think we were in this one for a lot of bullets here anyways. But yeah, anyway, here on the turn, he ends up checking, which I think he can probably do. He can probably mix here with his flushes here. I wouldn't be surprised to see some check. This is also like, let's say he has a hand like ace 3 without a heart here. I wouldn't be surprised to see him check here. There's definitely hands that I have him beat with even before the heart comes, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him slow down with a hand like ace 3, even though, 2 pair is a pretty strong hand here. That being said, I think I decided to go for a bet here. And that's mainly because I don't think that people are checking like a balanced enough range here. Like, let's say the ace 3s, the ace 9s, as much as they should be. And they're mainly like just pushing their equity with a hand they think is good enough to just keep piling in money and, bet for quote unquote protection. So although I think this hand probably mixes, I decided to bet here. I think this hand also has like pretty low like if we check here, our hand doesn't have decent equity going to the river. So let's say, for example, we have a hand like if I decide to call with a hand like Jack 10 of clubs instead, I would probably decide to check that one a little bit more on the heavy side because a hand with an open ender has a little bit more equity going to the river than a hand like Queen Jack, and therefore like it kind of sucks a little bit more if we get check raised off of our equity. And with a hand like this, I don't really mind bet folding if we face another check raise. So we check calls here. And we get a 5 on the river. And I remember I rolled for this spot. I think we probably don't get to pure bluff this spot, especially not containing a heart here. But this is also going to be one of the weaker hands that we have in this spot here too. So I essentially said that I was going to bluff half the time and give up half the time. And I remember I rolled a pretty big number and ended up betting here. Also, I'm going to assume that we have non-all-in sizes here. I would assume with a lot of our flushes, we get to use like very big sizes here because we want to have a pretty polarized size with our flushes here and essentially put max pressure on our opponent if they have a hand like, ace 9, pocket 3s, ace 8 that they decide to check raise, like ace 8 with the ace of hearts. So I definitely think we get to use some very large bets here. But I think those are mainly going to be used when we have a heart in our hand because I think it's very relevant to be blocking flushes here when most of the overbet sizes we're going to use here are going to be hearts. And as you guys see, it definitely shat the bet on me again. So I'm going to try to pull up Poker Tracker. Let me just think of the exact spot. I think it was essentially at 100 bigs. We were button versus hijack, I believe. I think that'll be fine enough. And the flop was, well, actually, I'm just going to pull this up here real quick. Apologies again, guys. So, yeah, anyway, very interested to see how this hand ended. I thought at first, like, maybe the hand was a bit spew, but I think it's probably kind of fine. I'm also happy to, like, share, like, it was recent enough where I can remember exactly what I was thinking in that spot. So, and it's also good to make these assumptions when we are studying. So that way, when we're making our assumptions, not only can we see if we played the hand right, but we're also making correct assumptions while we're playing as well. I think I just got a little repetitive there while I was trying to pull this spot up. So on the flop, we were cut off versus big blind, ace of clubs, 9 of hearts, 3 of hearts. So let's do this. Single raise pot, ace 9 3. So again, I think that the check call may have, or the call versus the check raise might have been a little bit aggressive. And versus an unknown opponent, I would probably just pure fold. But versus an opponent who's capable of finding probably some some stronger or some weaker check raises, I decided to end up calling. I guess that's another point that I wanted to address. I did not check his check raise numbers. So on the flop, he is check raising about 40% of the time. I mean, not a huge sample here, only 37 hands, but I mean, it's a decent check raise number, I would say. Okay, I don't know if this is check raise versus in position c bet. I think that might be okay right here. So no, c bet. Okay, irrelevant either way. So I was gonna say there's a bit of a difference between check raising, let's say if he opens low jack and I call him the button and he check raises me in a spot like that when he's a preflop opener, as opposed to like if he defends a big blind and he check raises versus a c bet. I think the numbers will definitely look different in those spots. But either way, I just assumed that he was check raising a competent enough range here. So we bet pretty small here. I think this spot is probably a pretty high frequency c bet, although not pure at this stack depth. So we are going to check. And yeah, we're c-betting pretty aggressively here, only checking about 16% of the time. So as I said, I would probably just implement a full weight c-bet strategy here to essentially simplify things for us. And things are always going to be more complicated on the turn. And when we add another card to the equation and our opponent still has 100% of the hands that in their range, things are going to be a little bit more complicated. So this is just essentially a way that we simplify our strategy here. So yeah, we went for the third pot c-bet here, which we apparently want to do with most of our range. And we faced check raise. And we can see the queen jack with the clubs. Okay, we were pretty accurate there. We are defending with the backdoor flush draw here. So, and again, I think if we are facing an opponent who is not really check raising enough bluffs to value hands, I think calling this 100% really isn't as valuable as it would be as if, obviously Odin's playing against itself here. It's going to find the appropriate amount of raises here. So I definitely think, for the reasons I gave, I'm kind of happy to see that this is a call here. But as I said before, I think if it was just some random, tight, unknown opponent, I wouldn't mind just folding the spot. But we have to get a little bit uncomfortable against stronger opponents. I think the turn was the 8 of hearts. Yep. So 8 of hearts. And you guys also don't know what our opponent had. I think he had ace-9 by the river, by the way. So yeah, he had ace-9, and again, I said well played on his part. I think a lot of people, even though this heart kind of sucks, I think they just want to bet basically for quote-unquote protection, and they don't want like a bad run out to come. So it's good on him that he found a check here. I think this definitely gets in here with the ace-9. Now what we want to see here is what our opponent is doing. Kind of interesting to see that. Maybe it's because, I don't know, he's 3-betting a hand as strong as ace-9 here quite a bit, or why this isn't getting in so much. Or maybe I used the wrong size here. So yeah, so you can see the larger size is actually being used in the spot. They want to be using a bit more of a polarized size. And this might also go to the fact that we are a little bit more deeper stacked. So let me just check the size he used again. We'll use the size that he did. So 22, so it's like 4x. So, okay, so we bet 2, and so essentially these two are right in between what he used. I'm just going to use this for the sake of simplicity because this is going to show more of his range being used. But on the flip side, I also think Queen Jack probably doesn't call as much because he is using a bit of a bigger size. So you see that is not calling as much as it was versus a smaller size because we're getting a worse price, so we can't defend as accurately. But yeah, we'll call anyway. It does get in there, so we're still going to see our hand. So the 8 here on the turn. And our opponent slows down with the ace-9, and you can see ace-9 of spades is definitely indifferent here, mixing bets and checks. It's definitely strong enough to keep betting for value and requires some protection, but there's also hands that it's definitely close to drawing dead against, so that's why you see it slowing down. So this is just a good way that our opponent is kind of balancing their strategy and not just betting when they have value hands and checking when they have hands that aren't strong enough to either bet for value or semi bluffs that he check raise and he's giving up with on the turn. So good on him to find the check here. So he ends up checking, and we'll go to our queen jack. And yeah, I'm pretty happy to see this. So I'm going to go to the Jack 10 here real quick. So you see Jack 10, although it is still betting pretty aggressively here, it's definitely betting less than the Queen Jack is here. And I think that, again, goes behind the Jack 10 having more equity, having more outs to a straight. As opposed to our Queen Jack that only has a gut shot here. So this is pretty low in our value range here. So I guess we did find a good bet here with the Queen Jack, and the size we're going to be using mostly is going to be a small size, and I think we actually see that quite a bit with our flushes here because we're going to have hands that we want to bet for value and protection that aren't necessarily flushes. So by doing that, we want to incorporate some smaller sizes so we're not just piling in a ton of money. Like let's say if we have ace nine ourselves, we don't want to just pile money in because I'm sure our opponent is checking some flushes here as well as like pocket threes, just hands that have us in pretty bad shape. So you can see that size being utilized. Looks like we used the block bet size here too, so good on us. And then we went for essentially 3/4 here on the river, and our opponent I definitely think has 0% fold in this spot, especially versus that size. Maybe versus an overbet, they end up incorporating some fold. So we're going to put the block in here. And yeah, pure calling here. I don't think our opponent wants to be raising here. And then on the river, again, my mushy brain forgot. Okay, 5 clubs. Our opponent is going to pure check here, I would imagine. And yep, essentially pure checking here. And then with our Queen Jack, we are actually giving up here. So this is a bit surprising to me too. I mean, I just always assumed here that we need to have some bluffs that aren't heart oriented. I would assume that we can't just bluff hands that aren't hearts, but maybe rather than bluffing a hand like Queen Jack that doesn't have a heart, we could essentially like merge bet like a pair here that's probably not good enough to show down. Like let's say if we have a 9 or an 8 in the spot somehow, or a 3 even. Let's say for example, okay, King 4 of hearts I don't think really gets in there unless it's a flush draw here. So let's see if I can find a quick example of like some pairs that might want to be bluffing here. I'm assuming these are all going to be hearts. 9x and 8x, it looks like they're basically pure checking. So I guess, yeah, it looks like most of the bluffs that we have are coming from the heart variety that we have here. You can see that the ace jack here with a heart is pure bluffing. I guess we don't have the ace of spades jack of hearts. I don't know why. Why is this not showing anything? Oh, it's just giving up. Okay, ace of clubs. Oh, ace of clubs because ace of clubs is on the board. But yeah, surprisingly, like the jack of hearts is giving up here 100%, but the ace of hearts is betting full weight. We can check out the ace 10 here real quick. Kind of the same situation here with the 10 of hearts. It's pure giving up, and the ace of hearts is pure bluffing. Now, I would pure bluff with the ace of hearts in both the spots here with the ace jack and the ace 10, and would probably mix bets and checks with the 10 of hearts. So I would definitely have been off in this spot. It looks like it wants to. Oh my god, the other thing I'm not recognizing is that obviously this is top pair, duh. So it's essentially saying that ace 10 with the heart is strong enough to bet for value. Well, actually, you know what it's doing here is it's merge betting here. So it's the size that it's using here is only the all-in size, and we can see that when we do decide to bet, we're mainly only betting like pocket aces here is giving up here 100% of the time. So essentially with this run out with the straight and the flushes being out there, essentially we can't even bet a set of aces for value once the pot is this bloated. So if we can't bet top set here, that means the only hands we are betting for value here, let's see, I don't know if we get any straights here in this spot or not. Funny enough, we are jamming 5s, but 5s also blocks flushes here too. Yeah, but also aces blocks some flushes here. So kind of curious why the pocket 5s wants to bet 100%, as well as the pocket 3s are mixing here too. So this is kind of interesting. So bottom line is we do have some give ups here, or some checkbacks with hands as strong as trips. I'm just trying to see if we ever have straights. I don't think we really get a lot of 6-7 unless it's 6-7 hearts specifically. So yeah, I don't think we have many straights in the spot. So essentially, we're only betting flushes for value. And if we're betting such a narrow part of our range, like we're only betting flushes for value, we want to use a very polarized size here, because we're not thin value betting like ace king with the king of hearts. We're not thin value betting like ace nine suited here is just giving up. So all these hands are no longer bluffs. So that means when we bet, we're going to be super polarized here to only flushes. So that's why, funny enough, like this ace jack and the ace 10 are basically merge bluffing. So I guess what we can see here is when we do bet with a hand like this, we're probably going to get our opponent to fold better hands. I mean, this is the only reason that we could be betting hands like this and turning them into bluffs here. So we're going to see some folds by, I would assume, some two pair. Yeah, you can see versus the overbet jam. They are calling here a little bit with the ace nine, but it's mainly folding here. Let's see, pocket threes is essentially a pure fold now. So we do get better hands to fold when we do turn our ace jack with the ace of hearts into a bluff here. Even a hand like ace three of spades, ace three of diamonds is kind of indifferent between call and fold. And again, if I'm playing against a random opponent and I see this line, I'm probably going to pure fold these hands here, just because I don't think our opponents are ever going to find the overbet jam here. For this size, I just think people are not going to be as aggressive as they should be. So yeah, kind of an interesting spot here, and definitely a nice spot here on the river that we ended up getting to, where we see our hand is only strong enough to be betting essentially flushes for value here, and that's the only thing that we're going to be betting. Where are we here? Check, call. Oh, five of clubs. I think it got a little confused there. Either that or I did. So our opponent checks. And yeah, so this is a really good spot for you guys to see as well, that when our range on the river is very polar, like we're not having those thin value bets with hands like, let's say, ace king with a heart, ace queen with a heart, even a hand like ace three. Now that these hands are not in our value range, that means we're only betting flushes. And when we're only betting such a narrow part of our range, we want to use a very polarized, or we're using a very polarized strategy. We're only using a very specific, very top part of our range to be value betting here. And when we're value betting such a narrow polarized part of our range, you can see that we're using a very polarized size here. And these thin value bets really don't make it in here. Although in theory, I think they're fine, because people don't, they have a hard time folding value. I wouldn't be surprised to see this like actually being good, in theory, or in practice anyway, when we're playing against, regular opponents in our, anything between $1 to a $50 tournament. This probably is fine, but it's just good to get kind of an idea about what the solver is doing, and just a good way for you to identify it, like how strong of a hand you actually need to be value betting a board this wet. So to see hands like pocket aces, and actually it kind of makes sense, because I would assume that most of our hero calls here are going to be like ace nine, ace three, ace eight. So when we have pocket aces here, we block a big part of our opponent's value range here. So actually, I'm a little frustrated with myself that I didn't notice this at first. So when we block aces here, we block a big part of our opponent's hero calling range here. So that's why when we have a set of aces here, we want to basically pure check here. And when we have hands like pocket fives, pocket threes, pocket nines here, we want to be betting a little bit more, because we unblock a little bit more of our opponent's calling range, or hero calling range here, basically. And even pocket nines is indifferent, because I guess the strongest hand our opponent is going to call us down with, that's not a flush, is going to be ace nine. Obviously, pocket aces and pocket nines heavily block these, and a hand like pocket fives, pocket threes really don't so much. So yeah, glad I got that there at the very end. So yeah, we'll wrap it up here. We're a little over an hour, and yeah, just wanted to throw out this video. I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, just to kind of give you guys an idea about what, a day in my study routine actually looks like. Obviously, I would fly through these a little bit quicker if I wasn't explaining everything, because I have a lot of spots that I need to study. But and again, my study sessions usually don't go much higher than an hour, so we got it in that time frame here. And yeah, just happy I got to bring this to you guys, and hopefully this gave you a little bit of an insight, not only about how I study myself, but how maybe you can be changing your study habits in the future, or hopefully I could just give you a few more tips and kind of lean you into the right direction of some approaches you might want to be using when you're actually taking time to study yourself. So yeah, happy to do this. Hope you guys find quite a bit of value in this. If you have any questions over this, please feel free to ask me anything you guys want. We'll be posting this as soon as possible, so I'll be taking any questions you guys have, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer. So yeah, going to cut it off here. This has been Kurt23x signing off for the Lionshare Poker Academy. Thanks, guys.